The LOV really need to step up their game. By My Lost and Found. Read by My Lost and Found. Summary. Izuku Midoriya and his friend Hitoshi have the unlikely habit of getting kidnapped on the regular. For once, though, they're not the kidnapee. Midoriya wakes up in the hospital after the training camp. Chapter 1. Well, gotta go. Summary. Izuku wakes up in the hospital after the summer training camp to remember that Katsuki was kidnapped. Well, looks like it's time to go on another mission. Izuku woke up in a daze. He felt funny. The kind of funny he'd normally feel after being kidnapped and sedated, but also the kind of funny he felt after recently being on painkillers. He cracked his eyes to see he was in a hospital bed. Ah, his true love. But this hospital bed didn't seem like the one at UA. No, after getting a better look around, it appears that he was in an actual hospital. All too familiar sight, but it was concerning that he didn't remember what he did to end up here. Even if he hadn't been kidnapped, he was in an unfamiliar place for an unknown reason, so he quickly took stock of things. With his body, his arms felt a little tender, but overall okay, which probably meant he had broken them again at some point. His surroundings were plain, a private hospital room empty of any cards or chairs out of place. There was only a bag he recognized as his sitting next to his bed. So he hadn't been here too long. His friends would have no doubt insisted on visiting and leaving little tokens of get well soon. Sometimes Izuku still can't fathom the fact he has such caring friends. The fogginess in his head dissipates with every second, and memories of what he could only assume was yesterday evening came rushing back. The training camp was attacked, and Kachan was kidnapped. Looking at the window of his room, Izuku could see that the sun had not quite risen. There would be a few more hours before the cover of darkness would be lost, meaning if Izuku was going to act, he should act now. Well, he knew Kachan was capable of taking care of himself, and the pros would no doubt be able to get him back. Izuku knew he wouldn't be able to relax until his friend was free. Plus, with the knowledge that villains were after Kachan, Izuku may or may not have slipped a tracker into his shoe. It was a little difficult with how beat up his arms were, but he'd managed. Izuku had learned years ago that it was always a good idea to keep at least 2 trackers on him at all times. Not for the police, no, but for his mission partner, Hitoshi. They turned out to be quite the package deal, getting kidnapped at the same time more often than not. It wasn't as if they'd hang out together after school. No. In fact, they'd kept their relationship strictly to sporadic kidnapping meetings to avoid that very risk. But it happened nonetheless, so they'd made the most of it, slowly becoming a well-oiled team. It had been hard not to with how often they were kidnapped. Akka had implied that she only got taken once or twice a year, but for the two of them, it was more like once a month or two. If he remembers correctly, the longest he went without at least an attempted kidnapping was 4 months. You'd think that getting a quirk would put a damper on the kidnappings for Izuku, but his bright red shoes still made him a target. Though the kidnappers did slow down after the UA Sports Festival, putting his new shiny quirk on display for the world to see. The Sports Festival also put it on display to someone else who previously didn't know he'd gained a quirk or made it into the hero course. It was certainly a shock for Izuku to meet his purple-haired partner in crime in a situation where they weren't being kidnapped. There were some less than kind words exchanged in the heat of battle, but after they talked it out, they grew closer than ever, now hanging out after school. Getting into UA had helped broaden their resources the two had access to, which is where the trackers came in. Technically, they'd gotten matching shoe trackers when they were 8, after saving up for a while, but those weren't the most accurate. Their new ones were much better, which was important for all the times when one of them was kidnapped alone and needed help. Most of the time, though, they could get themselves out of whatever predicament they had come across, but it was nice to have the backup, just in case. Izuku always made sure to keep multiple trackers on him. Call him overly cautious, but it had come in handy in this situation. Now Hitoshi would never be able to say anything about the 3 knives, 2 sets of lockpicks, 2 trackers, 1 mini flashlight, and 1 lighter he made sure to keep on his person at all times. It didn't take long for Izuku to fish his phone out of his bag and pull up the tracking app. Kamino Ward, Yokohama City. That wasn't too far from his current location, which was confirmed to, in fact, be the hospital. Hopefully that wasn't too far away from wherever Hitoshi currently was. Izuku definitely would prefer his partner's help on this one. Shooting off a quick text to see how soon Hitoshi could meet him at the train station, Izuku slipped out of bed and opened up the window. The early morning air was refreshing on his bare, slightly tingly arms. Looking down, he could see his way out. 3-story drop. Not too bad. But he could also see he was dressed in a hospital gown. He added a quick request for a change of clothes to Hitoshi before slipping into his shoes, writing a quick note, and silently climbing out of the window. Shota wanted to go to sleep and never wake up. It was a disaster. The training camp attacked, 13 affected by gas, 4 injured, 1 significantly injured, problem child, of course, and 1 missing. And they still had no leads. Sure, it'd only been a few hours, but every minute counted in kidnapping situations. The bone-deep exhaustion that ran through Shota's bones had nothing on his anxiety, so he was, yet again, making the rounds through all his students' rooms. Due to the hazard the gas posed, all 19 of his students were staying the night so they could be monitored. Quite a few of them were still unconscious from the gas or had succumbed to their own body's exhaustion, but most were awake with anxious energy. It wasn't long before he made his way to Midoriya's room. The damage to his arms were extensive. He only got out of surgery and had Recovery Girl heal him a few hours ago, making it necessary to sedate him, meaning he would be unconscious for at least a few hours more. Shota was glad his problem child would be unable to cause trouble until the sun had already risen, at the earliest. After seeing what Midoriya pulled at Hosu, Shota was sure he'd try something to save Bakugo, but that was something for Shota to worry about later. Before he'd had the chance to enter his student's room, a nurse approached. "Mr. Aizawa, I have a few concerns about one of your students, Midoriya Izuku," they said. Shota sighed. What could he have done now? "Yes, what's the problem?" "Well," the nurse looked nervous. "I was the one who inventoried his belongings, and I found some concerning items. He had multiple pocket knives, a set of lockpicks, and a lighter, all in his clothes." Shota was silent. "What? Why?" "I hope you understand that we had to confiscate these items, as such things aren't permitted in the hospital. He can of course claim them when he leaves, but I thought I'd let you know what I found because it was a little alarming, to say the least." That was an understatement. How did he even fit all that in his clothes? Never mind. He could ask Midoriya what that was about when he woke up. He had bigger problems to deal with right now. "Thank you for telling me about this. I'll look into it," he said, exhaustion creeping into his voice. The nurse departed with a nod, and Shota was left to continue what he was doing in the first place, checking on the problem child. He was proving to be even more of a problem child every day. Shota dreaded what headache-inducing thing he would do next. As Shota stared down at the note in Midoriya's distinctive scrawl, the window open in the background, he could feel the headache coming on. "I'm fine. Be back soon. Don't worry. Midoriya." The 2 boys, Izuku now dressed in actual clothes, were in Kamino within the hour. Izuku was a little unhappy to be without his extra gear. It was in his clothes the hospital had taken to who knows where. But at least he had the stuff in his shoes. Akka's wisdom still held true. They never checked the shoes. They followed the direction the tracker pointed them, dipping through the back alleys and side streets under the cover of darkness. Izuku wasn't particularly worried. The League of Villains appeared to be quite new to the villain scene, let alone the kidnapping scene. True, He didn't know why the villains had taken Kacchan in the first place, but if they were going to hurt him, they'd make sure everyone could see. No news was good news in that case, and he'd made sure to check the news. Though Izuku couldn't think of what angle they were going for. Kidnappers who made sure their victims were in pristine condition generally wouldn't be the type to do something drastic once they gotten back to their base. What else could they want from him? Recruitment? His quirk? Surprise adoption? It didn't really matter in the end because Kacchan would be out of there in a few short minutes. They had arrived. The building was very nondescript. Old, worn-down, brick exterior with dirty windows. A little sign on the side of the building revealed it to be a bar. Interesting. There were no guards visible outside the building. Some less experienced kidnappers tried to do that, but it seemed that the League was trying to be more discreet. The two of them silently cased the building for a few minutes before stopping below a window. There were no windows on the first 2 floors, but there was one on the 3rd floor, right next to a drain pipe. A glance at Hitoshi's lavender eyes was all Izuku needed to know they were on the same page. Scaling the building was no problem for the pair. Staying anchored to the outside of the window was a little more difficult, but they managed. The curtains were drawn, but they were so ripped it wasn't too hard to find a hole big enough to spy through. The inside of the building was just as nice as the outside, so not quite decrepit, but getting there. It was definitely a bar, and there were 2 figures visible in the room. Kacchan sat bound in a chair, his hands covered with some heavy-duty-looking restraints. He scowled at the other figure in the room, a blonde girl with buns. She looked about their age and was in a schoolgirl uniform. There was a hungry glint in her cat-like eyes as she spun a knife on the tip of her finger. From what they could see, she was the only guard present. Guards in the room always made escaping harder. They didn't have to deal with it too often, especially one-on-one. Sitting in a room guarding a single prisoner was boring and took away manpower, so not many did it. It made sense that they'd want Kacchan guarded 24/7, though. He was a powerful hero course student. When Izuku gets kidnapped, he's just seen as a weak, quirkless kid. Hitoshi took a small glass cutter and quickly punched out a hole in the window, just big enough for Izuku to fit the nozzle of his blowgun through. One shot with their custom sleeping agent was enough to take the blonde out. Katsuki looked at the dart sticking out of his captor's neck with shock, but his attention was quickly taken by the subtle squeaking of the window opening. Izuku and Hitoshi effortlessly slipped through the open window, landing silently on the floor. Katsuki's eyes widened in shock at the 2 dark-clad figures moving toward him, hoods pulled over their hair, masks concealing their faces. But before the blonde could react, Izuku's gloved hand covered the boy's mouth. Using his other hand, the brunette pulled down his mask. "Shh, don't panic. It's just me and my friend. We're gonna get you out of here. You just need to cooperate. If I remove my hand, do you promise to be quiet?" Izuku cautiously slid his hand off Kacchan's mouth after he got a small nod. The blonde sat in silent shock as Hitoshi got to work picking the restraints, but it didn't take long. With thinly veiled confusion, Katsuki hissed out a quiet question. "What are you doing here, Deku? I told you not to come for me. You should have left it to the pros." He scoffed. "How do you and the troll doll even find me anyway?" Izuku kept vigilant as Hitoshi slowly tackled the various locks. "I came because I knew we could get you out just as fast, if not faster than their teachers. Plus, I slipped my spares tracker in your shoe before you were taken, just in case." The look Kacchan leveled Izuku with was somewhere between shock, disgust, and bafflement. "Why the hell do you have a tracker in the first place? How paranoid does your nerd ass have to be to carry a tracker just in case you get kidnapped?" Izuku shook his head. "It's not in case I get kidnapped, Kacchan. It's when I get kidnapped." For the umpteenth time that night, Kacchan levels him with a bewildered look that suggests he may think Izuku has finally lost his marbles. Thankfully, he has Hitoshi to back him up. "It's a common occurrence. Trackers just make it easier to pick the other one up or help them escape if need be." Just then, the last of Katsuki's restraints fell away. Now, let's get out of here so I can go back to trying to sleep. Katsuki massages slightly bruised wrists as the three of them gather around the window. From what Katsuki can see, it's a sheer drop. How did those two gremlins get up here? How the fuck did you get up here? He quietly barks out. And how the fuck are we getting down? Hitoshi just glares at Bakugo before expertly descending the wall. Izuku, on the other hand, hums. Oh, yeah, you don't know how to climb down. And you can't use your explosions to fly down because that would be too loud. Oh, I know. In a swift motion, Izuku grabs Katsuki's waist and begins to climb down the building. It takes more self-restraint than Katsuki thought he had to not yell out in protest, but he keeps his mouth shut the whole way down. It's a silent walk back to the train station. Hitoshi is just tired. Katsuki is having an internal crisis, and Izuku's body is catching up to the fact that he should be in the hospital right now. When they board the train back to said hospital, Izuku admits to the others that he snuck out the window. Also not to be alarmed if he passes out from his injuries. Toshi just bops him on the head in disapproval as he leaves the train car to get on his own train home. And just like that, Izuku and Katsuki are standing at the hospital doors. And now we find our way to the part 2 of the series, the one that's heavily inspired by that one fic from Extracurricular Activities, the kidnapping one, if you've heard my podfic of it. But yes, I really like this one. I really like this little bit part of the series. I like my own take on it. I love the original as well, but I don't know. I had a really fun time when I was writing this, and somehow I don't get as much cringe. I guess because it was a bit later, but I hope you guys will enjoy this little part of the series, so I will see you next time.